as white folks. I also want to offer a labor acknowledgement. This is something new to me that I learned from Tania, Hino, one of our speakers tonight. And the labor acknowledgement that I chose goes like this. We pay homage to those stolen from Africa, placed in chattel bondage, forced into labor, and called slaves, to those who lost their lives blasting through mountains to build the transcontinental railroad, and to those who labored in our fields to feed the world and still do. We honor our ancestors for their forced, unpaid, underpaid, and exploited labor that built much of the Americas. And to our Indigenous, African, Asian, and Hispanic forebearers, we commit to the continued struggle for liberation, reparations, labor protections, due process, and equal access. For it is through this end of justice that we truly give honor. So those are our acknowledgements tonight. Thank you for tuning in. And I cannot remember who I'm supposed to turn it over to, but I think it might be Saunatina.
I think it's me, yes.
Okay, can I introduce you?
Yes.
Okay, Saunatina is the newest addition to our board. I'm so thrilled to have her officially on the board because she was already doing the work of a board member as our membership coordinator. Lifting up and supporting our members in learning new skills and stepping into new roles and feeling like they have all they need in order to really succeed in the league. So I'm so glad that you're moderating this panel tonight, Saunatina.
And that brings us to the panel, I guess. Welcome. I would like to once again say my name is Saunatina Sanchez, and I am so proud to be a part of this organization and very honored to have been asked to moderate this discussion. In a bit of an introduction, I did want to start, before I introduce myself, is to explain how the conversation will be happening tonight. Ground us in the reality of the moment. And so I do encourage you, attendees, to go ahead and click on the Q&A button in your Zoom options, and you will be able to ask questions and engage with the questions that others ask. And so basically the conversation will be happening in the Q&A instead of the chat. And I encourage you to reflect on the questions I asked the panel, and ask questions yourself that you've been wondering about this topic, that you think you would want to know about the organization that we are discussing today, the League of Women Voters. So with that said, thank you once again for being here, and a little bit about my background in this work. And I must start it in the personal realm because that is where it always comes back to. And in my personal life, I am the disabled daughter of disabled parents. I have experience in this system that we currently call our government, our aid system. And so I come to this work from a lifetime of analyzing what it means to be, considered not quite a part of good society. And once I started my professional life, I started to go into analyzing other people. I started in communications and journalism. I went into religious studies. I went into office work as a thing. I'm like, I want to know what it's like to work in an office. And it didn't suit me, so I stopped. And now and all of that work brought me to teaching, starting with language, and now into understanding how people think in neurology and neurotype stuff. So that is me as the moderator. And now I would like to introduce our first panelist, Tania. And Tania is our DEI focused board member director at large. but she's doing so much more for our group. And so I'd like her to introduce herself briefly.
Thank you, Saunatina, and thank you, Kathy, Heather, and the League of Women's Voters. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you, and all of you attendees are here to learn more about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a passion of mine because I'm a Mexican immigrant, U.S. citizen now, that votes and cares deeply about making a change for our community, especially the League of Women's Voters, and creating different narratives for different people. And hopefully we will all take away learning that having a different story and have different stories of different people creates inclusion, and having diversity makes an incredible, more interesting world than just having one kind of person or way of being. Since we all have our culture, all have our families, and we have all our ways of being and different abilities, neurodiversity, and we have so much amazing ways of expressing the love in this world. And now with this world going to war, it's so important that we remember that diversity makes us a much more interesting world. So I do many things and have many hats, but I am very passionate about creating direct narratives that change the way of seeing the world, because we definitely need to learn how to decolonize our minds to be able to see our people for who they are instead of what we think they are. So it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Can't wait to hear and have a discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Tania. All right, our second panelist that I would like to introduce is Heather Kelly. She is the president of our local Seattle King County League. And would you like to introduce yourself about this topic?
Sure. As I said, I'm here in a leadership role, sort of in normal league terms, I guess, but I really consider myself sort of like a, lifelong student on the topics of racial privilege and accountability. And I'm really lucky to be sharing this space tonight with some incredible teachers. So I'm showing up here tonight anticipating that I'll learn a lot and just with an open heart and open mind, so that hopefully people listening who maybe haven't had a discussion like this feel a little more comfortable, or at least have a reference point for how a discussion like this can happen, because it's not always comfortable, but it's really important that they happen. So that's me. Thanks, Saunatina.
Thank you. All right, our next guest, panelist, is Julie Sarkeesian, and she is, well, I'm going to let Julie introduce herself and what she's doing here.
Thank you, Saunatina. I'm Julie Sarkissian. I'm on the board of the State League of Women Voters of Washington. And I have the DEI portfolio, which I think is a similar role to Tania. I'm coming at this, of course, from a very, very different perspective. I've been thinking about these issues for a very long time because my career was in public health. And a lot of what we did in public health was look at the very difficult health statistics in different, what we called minority communities at the time. I also worked with Seattle Indian Health Board and ditto. became very acquainted with extremely difficult health statistics, and of course, a lot of the history. But I will say that the kinds of training and things I had were good, but my sense in joining the League and getting involved in the League's really recent policies, I mean, a lot of the, I was looking back at history, and really our history kind of goes back to 2020 when the League declared nationally that DEI is of equal status to nonpartisanship. So I'm like being blown away, quite frankly, by the amount of material, thinking, writing, and change that's going on. And really trying to, I too am very much a student, and trying to figure out the state's role vis-a-vis supporting these activities, both in our own group and with our amazing local leagues. So I really looking forward to hearing what my other co-panelists have to say tonight, because I really just am looking for inspiration, thinking, thoughts from every direction. Thank you.
Julie. And our final panelist of the evening is Liz Bander, who is joining us as a representative from the National. So I'm going to let Liz introduce herself.
Thank you. My name is Liz Bander. I am on the board of directors of the League of Women Voters of the United States and the League of Women Voters Education Fund. My portfolio at the League right now consists of voter access, which I chair that committee, and I'm a member of advocacy and litigation and DEI committees as well. And as much as DEI is a portfolio, for me, it's very much in everything I do. As Tania and Saunatina talked about in their stories, that because of who I am, it is a part of everything. I'm openly bisexual Jewish woman with ADHD and bipolar disorder. You get what you see here. This is how I look. This is my home office. And bringing all of myself to the League, bringing all of myself to work and to everything that I do, I've tried to involve myself in a lot of these, both because it affects me personally as a woman in tech in many ways, but also to ensure that we're doing internal work as well as external work, because organizations don't change without people in them changing and learning and growing. And yeah, I'm a student, and I expect that I will always be a student in this. I can't imagine that there will be a time when I can say I'm not a student, and I'm good with that.
Thank you, Liz. I'm so glad that you all kind of said that a student, you know, we are all learning, and I am as much a student as everybody here. The fact that I have facilitation skills because it's interesting to me does not mean I'm any less of a student in this subject. So I am here for this conversation, and I always grow after all of these as well. And so that's another reason that it's important for me to ground myself in this moment. So in that respect, just before we allowed the attendees to come in, I did a moment of reflection with our panelists and asked them to reflect on their purpose for being here. And I ask you to do that now. You are welcome to share that in the question and answer section, but I feel it's most important if you actually have something to write. We mentioned it in the material that you might want to bring something. And I like to give a moment. So we will take a quiet 30 seconds for you to just think about, after all of what we just said about why we are here, take a moment to write down what your intentions are and what you hope to leave this discussion with. And I'm timing it, 30 seconds. Alrighty. So, let's go ahead and get started with the panelists and chatting in a conversation. And I'm encouraging all the panelists as well to ask each other questions, right? If something piques your mind, I'm going to try and, call on people if you raise your hand, but also try and call on you if I think that I see you thinking through something, because the process of thinking through something can be really helpful with these conversations. So the first question I have for the panel tonight is about the word equity, because that is part of this night, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So to you, what does this mean to you? And what do you think it means to the organization that you're representing? Would Julie or Liz like to start?
I welcome your starting, Liz.
Sure. So in many ways, I see equity in a financial sense, because that, quite frankly, governs so much of our lives. And it's a factor in the world that we live in. For better or worse, it is the way it is. And so what I see is looking at a lot of this comes internally. And work that we've done at National has included looking very deeply within HR policies and staffing policies and salary policies and doing reviews, in-depth reviews of what's happening in the organization and making sure that it actually meets our values of equity. And when I'm thinking about these sort of internal controls, one of the other things is really in a lot of the work around language as well. That is, again, it's not necessarily financial, but looking at the work that we did with Vote 411 and ensuring that we had Spanish translations available. Because there is a large Spanish-speaking population that are voters, and to make sure that they have the information available. And then when it comes to looking at our various models for how do we support the states, how do we support the local leagues in the work that we do, what changes can we make in order to work together? And not all of those changes are fully baked, all of them are fully implemented, but it is this constant review by the board and by the staff and analysis. It's really about asking the questions, I think, because if we don't ask the questions, we don't even get an answer that we can dig into more. We just keep our head in the sand. And that's not the way to do it.
Oh yeah, no, I have a follow-up question here that I wrote down because I don't want to get into it now, but that's going to come up later. You got me a good idea. So Julie or Heather, do you have thoughts on this? Oh, we can't hear you, Heather. Plug.
I muted myself. Julie, I have thoughts, but why don't we hear from you next?
Well, I will admit that when I think of equity, I think of trying to right-size things for different groups. And it's a little bit one of, and I'm feeling really new to this portfolio, I'll be honest. I'm in it about 5 months. But, I think in the old days, we always thought, let's make things equal for everybody. So everybody has this, that, and the other. And then we realized, and I'm saying the smart people in our culture who've been writing and describing these things, that we really aren't all starting from the same starting place. And so I have been really thinking about when I was a working person that I didn't really recognize that. And, and all the tension and trouble we got into trying to figure these things out. So bringing that forward, to be honest, I am not exactly sure how we are playing that out at the state level. I mean, we're kind of quite focused on inclusion, and this is a kind of a different journey, equity. So I guess I will respectfully gather some ideas
Great.
from you all.
Tania, you had your hand up?
equity. I believe for me, equity is about access and creating access for and changing narrative for all kinds of people and different ways of being. And just like Julie was saying at the beginning, equity seemed like everything needed to be the same, but equity is more than that. It's looking at our structure of legal women's voter and seeing what is it, what are we doing to create equity for people
Oh, she froze.
Oh no, I was really loving it too because I wrote down, why are we doing what we're doing?
Yeah.
Right, Tania. So like I have your last thought written down. So if you have to come back, I understand. Sorry. Oh, you're back.
You're back.
Okay.
So it just creating that access for all people, that we have equity, and that if we have to provide more access for a certain group, than other groups, then we have to create that access, and we need to evaluate as a League of Women's Voter, what is it that we need to do to create that kind of access, because it's not the same for everybody. And if people are not seeing themselves in the League, we cannot access these people, these folks. And when it comes to voting, there's a lot of barriers for a lot of different people of color and different abilities. And it's very important that we create the access and evaluate where are our blind spots as a League, so that we can create equity and we raise people up.
That's what I love it. You know, it's funny. This is one of those things about language, and I believe Liz said something about the language too. And this is those opportunities, right? Whenever you see an opportunity. So, right, the things that we're blind to, there's the visually impaired community has been asking people to not use that as a reference to things. So I was just writing down like, what word can I use? And I was like, where are the shadows, right? Where, and that's how we do the work in the moment. So this is a question that just popped into my mind, right? And this is to any of our attendees who are, watching. If you would like to think in those moments, have you had those moments of like, oh yeah, I think I have how can you fix those things in the moment and make it not a big deal? Because it shouldn't be a big deal to respect somebody saying, oh, please don't use my condition as a way of saying that I am not, I'm incapable or da da da. So anyway, thank you, Tania, for saying that, because it's true, right? Yeah, we need to figure out why we're doing what we're doing. And I hope this conversation helps with that. So Heather, did you have any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that's been said already. And I guess the piece that I would add is, I don't know if everybody's like seen the infographic where different people are like at different heights looking, trying to look over a fence, and like some have a tall box and some have a small box. And I can post it in the chat for those of you who haven't seen it. But, for me, thinking about equity, I've realized very recently, I have been thinking about myself as the person who is tallest in the infographic, who needs the least. And I think there's some truth to that, because I do enjoy racial privilege and socioeconomic privilege. But I realize that when I think about it like that, I'm automatically thinking of the person standing on the box as like having some kind of deficit. And what I have realized, particularly working with this board and building these friendships and relationships that we're building, is that it's not like so cut and dry, right? Like I have my strengths and my weaknesses and my blind spots and my areas that I could improve on. And so does everyone else on the board. And racial privilege is a real thing. I don't mean to like suggest that it doesn't give me a clear advantage in our society, but I don't feel like viewing someone's difference as a deficit is doing me or our league any service. Having an awareness of difference and the way that people are discriminated against is important, but there's nothing intrinsic about a person's difference that makes them less than. And so just working on like retraining my brain around that reframe has been something I've been kind of focused on recently.
We've
Good.
talked about asset framing or asset-based framing, and that is really powerful to look just, yeah, these are not necessarily deficits.
Right.
It's just, there are different assets, and it's what do people want? Okay, I want to be able to vote uninhibited by any problems, and it should be really, really easy. Okay, cool. That's our ideal state. Let's work on how we get there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the case for so many ways, but looking at that asset-based framing, I'm so glad you brought that up, Heather, because it's so important in this conversation.
Yeah, and it's pretty new to me. Like I didn't even realize it had a name. So
Can you say that name again,
I
Heather?
found out about this like in the last 6 months, maybe, and it's probably been sooner than that. I'm just really bad with time at this point.
Okay, asset-based framing. We can pull some links and circulate those to our participants on the post-event email.
Yeah, and that's another thing too about this. Like, you know, we'll try to do things in the moment, but we'll have a lot of resources afterwards, things that come up during the conversation. And yeah, you know, Joanna's in the chat or in the question answer saying she is not fan of this graphic for the same reason, Heather. So there you go. Yeah. We have to analyze a lot about what our culture is, the messages of our culture. And one
May
of
I
the
just
things.
add one thing, Saunatina?
Yeah, please.
It's one of the things I've been able to do is take a look at, there was a study done on civic education activities throughout our leagues. And most of that study occurred in 2020 and into 2021. And I've taken a look at it, hopefully with my DEI lens in place. But I do believe that our leagues have developed a sense of equity in that they are reaching out to different communities. They are translating materials. They are working with tribes on different kinds of forums and things. And so I think, you know, when you apply, I see it happening outwardly. I guess I'll put it that way. That we had, I was actually kind of, I really wished at the time the survey had plucked out intention, you know, so there's, you know, it was somewhat anecdotal, and I am trying to get on top of activities this year, and this is, I think, about the 6th, and of course that's what I can call from networking. But I guess it did make me feel that around the state everyone is trying to think about it and work it and do it in the community, provide at least some equity around voting services. I mean, that's a core function. And so I think we are able to understand that piece a little more easily. Look at communities. I mean, it's not a systematic thing. But
wait, what do you mean by it's
going on?
It's not what do you mean by it's not?
Well, I'd say the work that folks are doing to create equity really for different communities is not probably totally systematic. I mean, in that sense, but I really sense the energy, the interest, and really the devotion in some cases to doing this.
That's good. And that's something that I might come back to, Julie, but I wanted to direct the conversation to, and there was a thing that Liz said that I said I was going to come back to, and I think it's a good transition because everybody here, I've heard you're talking about, right, words versus actions. So Liz said what, finances, and that made me write down, how do the resources flow through our organization? And so I'd like to ask Liz if that you have any, the amount of the per member fee that flows up and down. Can you discuss how that is determined
So the per member payment is voted upon by delegates at convention. So it is decided at convention by members who are in attendance. So in 2020, it was decided it remained the same. And I don't know what the recommendation will be in 2022, but it will come up for a vote at the national convention. And again, it's decided upon by the members. So in that sense, there is very much that the members are responsible for that in effect. And I don't say that to say to put that onus on them, but at the same time to say this is how it's a voted upon decision. It's not set by the board or by the staff or anything like that.
100%. And that brings me to my follow-up, which is how does it feel like members discuss this? How do members come to this decision that it's good? And can you discuss now do you know what the per member, the breakup is between state? Does anybody know the numbers? Because I know, well, I don't know the exact, but I know that state gets the least, local gets the middle, and national gets the most from the pie.
And that's not necessarily the same across all leagues and all states. It really does depend because it is different depending on the will of the members in each locale.
Okay, so can you explain that a little bit more? Because that's what I didn't understand, right? So I thought that that was a national thing and it was across the board.
The per member payment is a national thing in that each location, each state or local league is local league in effect is responsible for sending the per member payment to national for each member. That said, however that money is raised is at the discretion of the league. The League of Women Voters of Maine does not have a set fee for membership. They ask that people donate, but you can become a member for free. And other leagues have looked into this. They prefer to fundraise in order to support the per member payment. They have chosen to do that. Other leagues, like I said, some of them are exploring that. And it's really at their discretion. Some for student members, which we do not have a per member payment for anyone who is a student. That's set at $0. Some leagues will say, for students, it's still $5 or $10 or whatever it may be, even though national does not collect any money from that. And they are still full members of the league. But it really is at the discretion of individual local and state leagues as to how they want to handle that balance.
So one more time, because again, this is I'm always trying to get to the confusion. I'm confused still. So we have is it a percentage or a fixed dollar amount that we are supposed to send to national?
It is a fixed dollar amount, and that is set at $32 for LWVUS, and that is what is decided upon by members at convention.
I see. Okay, so the $32 is what and then each individual local decides how we are going to raise that, and some, like us, have a fee for membership, but not all do.
Yes.
Awesome. Yes. And then also at the state level, we have the fee is determined between local and state at the state convention, I'm assuming, Julie? Yes.
I'm sorry, I do not know.
Oh, okay. I mean,
I'm guessing because that tends to be how the league works.
Yeah.
We have conventions and councils, and they have conventions and councils.
And the reason I'm doing this little explanation is because, right, it's not a tangent. The way that we structure our organization and how the people who are part of our organization can understand it is very much a part of this. And that brings me to, right, the inclusive. So I'm going to stay on finances, right? but that's like, so I asked, how do the resources flow? And that brings me to the second word that we were, supposed to be discussing, which is inclusion. So what is it that you feel that you personally, and this actually goes to Julie's note I wrote down, systems versus individuals.
Yes.
Right. We are currently, it seems, Julie was saying, individuals working, and it's not connected to systems necessarily. So how do we connect those? How do in our organization and in our life? And wait, before anybody answers, take a moment to really think about this question, right? I'm asking because it's a heavy question. Finances and our organizational structure, what Tania was saying, right? How we structure ourselves, how we understand ourselves. What is it? How do we become an inclusive organization when we think of it in that way? Now, if anybody wants to raise their hand, I would like to call on them.
Well,
Julie.
I do have a preliminary statement, which is we view the leagues in Washington as a network of independent organizations that create programs, services, and so on based on how they view the community, what the community needs are. So in that sense, we don't say, okay, everybody, we want everyone to go and work on voter outreach to Spanish speaking populations in your county. We may, and do, we work on materials to share, but we don't really, so that's what I meant by systematic, because there, and I think Liz was sort of illustrating that from the national perspective too, that there isn't even, which was interesting, a set policy around fees and sort of each state and leagues are making those decisions. So this is a strength of this is just Julie speaking now. This is, I see a strength and somewhat of a weakness. Because we have, well, okay, a little tiny bit off the topic, but I felt that the league should have dropped everything to work on passing the voter rights law, that is, but that didn't really happen. We all pursued whatever we thought was the most important thing in our local leagues. And so that is, I came to this somewhat recently reading the Transformation Roadmap, and that is a characteristic of our organization. That's how we list. Can you expand on that, or just?
Yeah, I mean, it's a strength and it's a weakness in that sense.
I see Heather too.
We respond. Sorry, Heather.
No.
Okay.
We're having this conversation now. Don't worry.
So, yeah, like the local and state leagues can respond to their communities and to what is important in their communities, or what they feel is important in their communities. And that may be very different than what we're doing at national. At national, we were very active with the voting rights legislation with our staff. I went and got arrested at the White House for blocking the sidewalk at one of the protests. And we were out there with our partners in the space. Everyone from Black Voters Matter to the King family, to People for the American Way and the Worker Circle. And the reason that I'm bringing that up, because it was very important that as a national organization, we were very present there. I went because I felt it was really important that me as a white woman shows up and is willing to risk arrest, because I really hate that so much of civil rights and voting rights history is reliant on Black civil rights leaders who are putting their lives on the line in so many ways, as well as Latino and Hispanic folks and, Indigenous folks. But so much of it, especially, in the last 50, 75 years, has been the Black civil rights leaders, putting their bodies and lives on the line. And I couldn't sit there and be like, oh yeah, you guys go chase voting rights for me. I'm just gonna sit back here and hope you do it. Thanks.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
Yeah.
And that's that sort of inclusion, is that we're not sitting there saying, hey, you have to become a league member. What we're doing is saying, we're here with you and we're standing with you, and we're doing this in partnership. Our organizations are together and working together on this. It is not one or the other. And I mean, I see that as inclusion, even if it is not explicitly a, hey, you have to come join the league to participate in that, because I don't want to force people to feel like they have to be a part of us when they can stand with us.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah. You had your hand up, Heather. Was it about this, or was it related, or?
Yeah, well, it was about your original question about inclusion and sort of investment and like the finances.
Yeah, totally related.
Okay, so we had this forum, the League of Seattle King County had this forum a few years back, I think in 2019, called Budgets as Moral Documents. And we've been talking about that on the board. And I've been thinking a lot about like if we had our sort of shopping wish list, what would that look like? And how would inclusion be reflected there, right? And so I think, real actual dollar investment in becoming a more welcoming community, understanding what that looks like to different people, doing like targeted outreach outside our, sort of like very comfortable circuit of democracy, local democracy orgs, into communities that have lower voter turnout, or where there's a language barrier, or where there are other kinds of access issues, to Tania's point, and investing money in fighting those barriers for those communities, to me is what inclusion would look like at the local level. But I love what Liz said too about, again, like you think of inclusion, I don't know, maybe my mind's just like infographic trained at this point, but like this idea of inclusion as sort of this, okay, I'm in this group and it acts as like an amoeba where it sort of sucks in other smaller things and gradually grows larger. But like inclusion is equally about just showing up with humility, willing to stand with someone else on an issue that does not directly impact you, or that directly impacts a minority of your constituency. So I feel like, to me, that's what investing in inclusion would look like.
I like that. Investing in inclusion. I also wrote down fighting barriers for all communities, especially those that have been excluded, right? That to me is inclusion. That's a great, I'm also good at coming up with those. Anyway, Tania has her hand up. I saw you, Tania. I'm just like, yeah. Like I like to let people finish. So yes.
So I come from a very different background and come from a lived experience of not being included and working really hard to get included. So what I see that our priority, besides already having our fees being in different levels of prices and not forcing people to pay fees for becoming part of the league, was wonderful. That's a wonderful thing of inclusion. And my vision of inclusion goes beyond becoming members in the league. My work that I see as inclusion goes really well with, it goes hand in hand with equity. It can coexist one or the other. It has to be together. And And in order to have diversity, and in order to have diversity, you need to have inclusion first, because people need to feel belonging, and we need to figure out as a league what's missing, what's the missing piece. And that's why it's always asked, what's our problem as league members? What's our biases and implicit biases that we are not putting our lenses, and we are trying our best. It's a new topic for the league. It's a new topic. DEI is a new topic. Diversity and inclusion is a new topic. So it's really important that the first thing that the league needs to do, and we need to invest, and all of you that can invest in the league needs to make sure that we divert that money to make sure that we are DEI lens, because it's not just about being diverse. It's about including not only members, board members, but also the people that's in the board and the members, to make sure diversity money so that we direct this money so that we can really see what's the missing piece in our voting system that will include those people that do not have the equity to get out there and vote. Because that's the key thing. It's not just about translating things. It's about creating access, transportation access. It's about putting bills in the law that will create that voting day will be paid for those people that can access, because I can take a day off if I need to get, and if I need to study all the bills and everything that's on the voting ballot, I will study it. But do we have people out there to train, to teach, to be open about explaining? Because it's about translating. If we want to include, if we want to make sure that we as league are including these voters, we want to make sure we can have a specific division that will describe what's in the voting ballots, not go beyond translation. What is keeping people from registering first? What is keeping people from registering?
Tania, I have a direct question for you in that vein, right? Because as somebody who joined the league knowing that I was going to be coming into a fight, kind of, right, to feel welcome, to feel included, what was your sort of reasons, and what was your goals in order in this role in joining this and trying to get this organization? Like, how did you see the successes, right, of our work?
Well, I'm really lucky that we have an amazing board that's open to learn and learn about differences and the implicit biases. So we are all working together to learn about what's our own implicit biases, because we can put our lenses of DEI, and I keep saying the words because it's all these for people with different abilities. Doing the acronyms is really hard. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, in order for us to be able to be voting members and to be a board member and to be voting people, citizens, and to be able to see from that lens, we need to do our own work. In order to actually put it in action, we need to do our own work. It needs to start from here, we can't change everybody. We need to change ourselves. Right? Do
you see this conversation, right, that we're having tonight as moving that forward, that goal forward?
Of course. Anything that opens access to having conversations and to being able to have a conversation is for a step forward to moving, taking a little bit of the blindness of And when you say about our community, a blind community, is not about being blind, it's the ignorance blindness. I'm not meaning sightseeing blindness. I'm saying ignorance blindness, because we need to be educated. We need to learn about differences to be able to see the world with all the rainbow that we have and all the colors that we have. But what I see is that we all need to do the work, and by doing that, so then we can actually access and use our own privilege to create access.
Bringing this learning moment that we're experiencing together right tonight, in terms of like hearing from the blind and visually impaired community that they really don't want us to just keep using it in that way. And part of the reason is the reason you just explained it, right? Blind people aren't ignorant, right? It's not about the physical act of not being able to see. It's about the action of turning away from the subject. It's about closing your eyes, not about being physically blind, about you covering yourself. So that's why, right, we find well, all language is euphemism, but I won't get into that because I also have linguistics in my background and we don't get into that. So, but we use, shadow or, some other kind of thing that indicates what we really mean by that being ignorant. Yeah. And I've seen, yes, I saw Liz wanting to hop into this. Yeah.
So this is a quote that I actually had in my notes for this meeting, and that I refer to all the time. It's from Walter Katundu, who was interviewed by the Washington Post. He's a Black bird watcher, and he put up signs in a San Francisco neighborhood to be like, hey, this is me. I'm a Black bird watcher. Don't call the cops, which is freaking terrible. But he said this amazing thing about organizations. And he said, a lot of organizations and institutions talk about outreach and trying to figure out how to increase their numbers and get more people of color interested. It really isn't about that. It's about addressing the nature of those organizations, not bringing people into a space that is still riddled with the same issues and toxicity. You have to change the space, because otherwise you're inviting people to contend with all of those issues. I will post the link to the article because, like I said, I keep this in front and center in my mind all of the time, because it is about changing the nature of the organization. And that is changing our hearts and minds as much as it is changing the structural things that we can do. Like I said, like, looking at salary reviews and org charts and things like that. Like, in some ways that is very easy by comparison, because we know what questions to ask there. We have people who can really help us do that. Looking internally at yourself can be really, really difficult. And I mean, I've struggled with it many times, just sitting with the like, wow, what am I thinking here? Why am I thinking this? And am I okay with what I'm thinking now? How do I feel about this? And some of it is like, yeah, you know what, this is a fair concern coming from someone of my background, that I don't feel safe in this instance. There's others where I'm like, yeah, wow, I need to go unpack this a lot more.
That's good. I also have that topic in my notes. So it's like you, again, like the mind meld, it's great. Cause like, I was like, why would I want to join this group, right? Because I asked Tania why she wanted to join this group, and I expressed, my fear, my reservations when I was invited to join this group. And I'm like, oh, I know what it's like to be a part of a group of white women, and please, my attendees, try not to be, reactive to that. I also have reactions, when I have to react to or interact with my Mexican family, I have a reaction to the experience that I've had in my life. And the experience that I've had in my life is often when I join white-led organizations, I'm going to get a lot of resistance to the ideas that I present. And I knew it wasn't necessarily about me in my race, and it wasn't until I was recognized as autistic that I really realized what actually why I was being excluded for so easily and so unconsciously. And so that's one of the things. And so I started it because I have my experience as somebody with my last name and my Mexican heritage and being raised with this pride of my culture. And so I had this framing of people see me as, you know, an incompetent Mexican, but really they probably were being like, oh, she's a weird autistic girl. But both of them are bad. So that brings me to, right, what is it? Who are you trying to include in this organization? And what is your real purpose for being diverse, for wanting to be diverse, right? Like Tania was saying, is diversity the goal? No. Liz was saying, not really, no. But like, what is the goal? Why do you want to be an inclusive organization? Does anybody have thoughts on that? Liz?
I have a really clinical
And then Julie.
version. It's a fiduciary responsibility for me. This is how our organization will thrive, is if we ensure that we have a diverse and inclusive and equitable organization. This is what will get us to the next 100-year mark. And so for me, it boils down to that very simple explanation in some ways, but it's also mission driven for me, in the more emotional sense, I guess. Our mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. There are no qualifiers. We do not say we empower voters, but only some voters, only voters in Washington or only voters in Texas or whatever. We empower all voters, period. We defend democracy for everyone. And so if we're going to do that for everyone, we need to have everyone feel welcome and included and want to engage with us, whether that's as a member or as a partner. I want people to engage with us willingly. To me, the membership question, it does matter, but in some ways it's more to the point of, are you willing to talk to us and have a conversation with us? I don't want to make it all contingent upon membership, as I've said several times. I would love people to want to be members, but I don't want to make their participation and engagement contingent upon that.
100%. I love it. That's true, right? Yeah, that is what we are. What's what we now, right? I've been doing a lot of work in terms of, you know, promoting the league and my role as membership coordinator at the moment. And so what I keep coming back to is, right, as the person who is the league right now, what do I want to make my league? So that's where I feel it's good that Liz is saying that. I have support from the national. I see your hand, Tania, but Julie had her hand up first, so I'm going to go Julie and then Tania. Okay.
Well, I get, wow, my mind is flying around here. I guess I've been, I guess another thing I picked up in the transformational roadmap was, you know, not needing to necessarily have members in the traditional sense to be part of the work of the league. And that's something I'd really like to discuss, you know, sometime in detail. And I actually heard that the state of Maine has non-members on their state board. Is that something you've heard, Liz? Anyway,
I don't know. They're not one of my liaison states.
Oh, okay.
But I have talked to Anna, the executive director, director there a few times, but not on that specifically. I'm sorry.
I tend to think of the structures that we have built up as a little bureaucracy or whatever we are.
Yeah.
And that we really, I mean, since I'm not coming at it as someone who is worried about other issues, I worry about, you know, we spread people thin over too many directives. We have sort of a burden of just getting to the point of understanding what people are talking about, which is what happened to me at the state level. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I was learning a new language. And, you know, I'm an old girl. I've been around. So those are the kind where my brain goes about why we haven't been able to be as inclusive. There's that whole set of issues, I think. And when I was doing voter outreach, I could often get friends to come and do things with me, but they wouldn't join, you know. But as most of you know, it's not rocket science to do voter registration in Washington State, so I could give them a tutorial.
Yeah.
What I really wanted was people that would go out and be with me and talk to other, you know, friends that are interested in talking to people, which is my interest. So I guess applying those ideas to our leagues has intrigued me as perhaps a way to be more inclusive, because you don't have to know all this stuff. You can still be really effective in doing something that you care about. And we have quite a variety of things to offer people. So
Takes all kinds.
I'm interested in models.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry?
I said it takes all kinds, right?
Right, exactly.
Hey, Tania, you had something to say?
Yeah, Liz, you brought a good point about membership and changing systems in our own league that is really wanted to remark. I just wanted to give a simple way of putting what, I mean, Saunatina asked why I wanted to join when I probably would not feel safe and be able to feel courageous to make space in the space, because not a lot of people are going to be looking like me. For me is the importance to have a voice, different voice, and to be able to represent these people that are not feeling safe to be part of the league, whether just as volunteers, whether as a member, or whether their issues are not feeling important. And so when I say about, so let's put it in perspective, diversity is getting an invitation to a party. If you want to be in a party, okay? Inclusion is being invited to plan the party. And equity is having a voice and actually getting a carpool to the party. And knowing how you like to party. That's inclusion. So that's really important for us to understand that even the whole system of how we are doing things might have to be restructured all over again, because it was built from a system that is not inclusive yet. And that's something that we need to recognize, that is not inclusive yet. It's not equitable yet. And that's why we're not having all representatives to vote. So there's so much work to be done. Again, I remind us, it's wonderful that we have this forum. It is wonderful that my personal board members, league board members, are willing to dig inside, and that we're doing the white tears, brown scars, to dig into more why we are where we are. But it's really important that to know that this is a drop in the bucket. We have so much work to be done. There's so much investment that needs to be done so that this is really addressed, because the league has done so much amazing stuff. And without the league, we would not be where we are now, but it is still not inclusive and it's still not diverse. And that's a big issue. It's a weakness of our league. And I think we have the power to change that.
That's good. I mean, and I have similar reasons, right? I am the kind of person, it takes all kinds, like Julie was saying, right? I am the kind of person, and most of the people who join the league are probably the kind of people, we're the people who show up, we do things, and I show up and I represent my community. And I try to do that as powerfully as I can in the ways that I can. And that's why I joined the league too, because I felt this was a space that I could make an impact. And I think that I am. So Heather, your hand is up.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, like the value of striving to become more inclusive, I agree with Liz, like there's the pragmatic aspect, fiduciary duty. The organization needs that to survive and thrive. And you know, Tania's point of like this is just the right thing to do. It's important that people feel safe in organizations like this that are fighting for what we're ostensibly fighting for. I feel like, I mean, it, you know, it's sort of maybe of the moment, but reflecting on sort of the world events of the last few weeks, it's never been more clear to me that like the way that we have forged our path as a nation, or you know, even a broader like Western, you know, civilization, has not worked out great. And being willing to relinquish some of that power or some space on the stage, or however you want to think about it, and trying something different feels, you know, I think for a lot of folks, uncertain and scary because you don't know what, you only think about it as like, I'm giving something up, right? Like when I don't have an all white board, I'm like, I'm, you know, wandering into the unknown. There's going to be more conflict. Everything's, you know, it's like turmoil and chaos. And I just don't all those things describe where we are right now? Like all of those things are already happening, and like it's painful and terrible. And what we have done, I mean, you know, white folks who've been less inclined to share power. And I don't say any of this because I feel like guilt is a useful feeling. It's not what anyone needs us to be feeling. And it's not motivating. It just makes you sort of close your eyes, like Saunatina is saying. But like, I say it because I'm really waking up to the fact that like, there have been so many missed opportunities. You know, it's sort of like a thought experiment, like what would the world look and feel like right now instead of this if some of these conversations had happened a long time ago, or if the white suffragists who found our organization said, you know what, we don't know if we're going to get the vote, but it's more important to us to stand in solidarity with like our sisters of color in this fight. And, you know, yeah, it's a thought experiment, but it's like we do have a choice to do it differently right now. And we don't really have a choice to do it the same. We have a DEI policy, which I view as kind of a call to action, and an opportunity for personal accountability. And I welcome it.
Thank you. That's amazing. And bringing us back to the present moment, I have to acknowledge the time, because that is a thing that I have to acknowledge, because I'm not, you know, magic and I can't do the ending. Anyway, 10 minutes left or so, right? I want us to feel in a wrapping up mode. And I wanted to bring up 2 comments and questions from the audience, actually, because there's some really good stuff. So Joanna and Lauren actually have somewhat of a combo, and I feel I'm going to ask them both at the same time because it's connected, as it all is. All of these issues are. Joanna says all politics is local. She was referring to when Liz was talking about the national and wanting to focus so much on the, you know, so the Voting Rights Act and all that. And we have to do this at the local level. And Lauren brings up, you know, the fact that a lot of people don't feel like even if they vote, it makes a difference. So how do we change, you know, and nobody's expecting us to answer these very complicated questions, but from your perspective, in your imagining of this future world that we're trying to build, how do we make sure, how do we maintain a society where everybody's voice actually matters and our representatives are actually representing to us? It's a heavy question, so if you need a moment, but if you have any thoughts, feel free to speak up. And if you have any suggestions in the audience, because yeah, we holding ourselves accountable, right? If I, as I haven't been sharing much because I've been trying to facilitate this conversation, but as a membership coordinator, I am a leader in this organization. And so that's one of the reasons I decided to take on this role. And part of the conversation that we had before this, and during a planning meeting, was somebody saying, apologize, right? We want to apologize. That's what they want. I thought this event should be for. And my response was, then what? Right? We've heard apologies. We know people are starting to become aware that there's problems. So this was your opportunity tonight in your attendance, right? To be sort of oriented to this conversation in a different way, to hear the different perspectives that we all have taking on this one issue, and that it's okay to feel uncomfortable and it's okay to make mistakes while we're having this conversation, to ask questions. That's what I wanted to come out of tonight, and I think it did. So yeah, I invite, like I said, the panelists to give their closing thoughts and answer our attendees' questions. How do you feel that we can make a difference by actually making our votes matter in a real way?
I actually, my answer relates just to what you just said, Saunatina. So if I may seize the mic, I'll make it brief. I mean, you just said it, like, ask questions. I mean, that's something I've learned from you, right? Like, and I don't know that the league has historically asked questions in the way that I mean, where we're asking voters, what matters to you? How can elected officials show to you that your opinion matters? So I think in a lot of ways, like, being more effective facilitators of those conversations between constituents and elected officials could be, a way that the league steps up and strengthens those connections.
Right, Tanya?
I will let somebody else go because my dog decided to.
Julie, you're on.
Well, I do. One of our programs, our citizen lobbyists in Olympia, have really amazed me. We have an outstanding set of people who are working extremely hard to bring a lot of legislative issues to legislators' attention. And I'm not sure this, I just want to point that out, that at the state level, we are working really hard. We had an action day to kind of train people about the issues and talking with their legislators. And then lobby days when we actually set up appointments for people to meet with their legislators. Now, we got pretty good participation, but it seems to me that we need to invite more people. We need to, to be really a lot more inclusive. And we did have some non-members coming in my legislative district meeting. So I think we have some infrastructure like that. That is one way to get to legislators and talk to them. And I also feel that our Observer Corps programs, it pays to watch something and have an eye on there and say we're here. So we have some structures. I'm not sure Saunatina is totally convinced, but
I'm writing your.
I just think that there are some ways that the league has developed that can work on some of those issues.
My writing face might look not
okay.
engaged, but
Okay.
I'm writing, I literally was writing down what you were saying.
Yeah.
Because it's true,
Thank you.
right? We do have things in our organization. That's why I think that I and Tania kept coming back to the same. We wouldn't have joined this group if we didn't feel that our personal goals in this work could be realized or couldn't be realized through this group, right? We are here because we hear you saying you want to do this work. And we are saying, well, okay, here's how you do the work.
Figure it out.
It is work. It's work. And work isn't always fun, but it can be. And you can enjoy it if you think of it as something that can be easier, just like any skill, right? So what we have like 4 to 5 minutes for our closing thoughts. So Liz or Tania, do you have any closing thoughts?
I will say that compassion is the main thing. Knowing that none of us are perfect. We're trying the best we can with the common good of knowing that we want access for all, and that we work hard, each of us working hard on taking care of this implicit bias, because we all have it. I have plenty of them. And like you all said, we're all learning, and we're students, forever students. And be curious, be inquisitive, and learn to just apologize when you make an impact. And because we all do. I am guilty of them, and the impact is great for a lot of people. So just know that it's painful. This is a painful road. And I have mentioned this in our different groups. Giving birth is painful. Life is painful. And this work is painful. And we can't escape pain and discomfort. Let's just face it. Let's face it together. We can do this together. Everybody in their own time. Not everybody learns how to walk and crawl or crawl at the same time. Everybody has their own developmental stage that they need to work. And it's okay where you are. We are all doing our best. It's a privilege to be here having this conversation with all of you. And thank you for all the listeners as well.
Thank you, Tania. Yeah, can't expand it because it's all good there. Liz?
Yeah, I mean, to your question, Saunatina, I would hope that everyone would feel safe contacting their representatives, whether they voted for them or not, whether they're eligible to vote or not. I know that's not the case. I know that it's never going to be the case. I hope that we can increase the people who feel safe doing so, and not just their representatives, but people in power in general, to reach out and to say, hey, this is what I need from whatever system that that these other people are leaders of. Where I think the League can fit in is one, some of the lessons that we have in terms of just the technical parts of how to do the advocacy, stuff that I wasn't familiar with when I joined the League, of how to tell my story to a legislator. The other part, though, I think is also we can kick down doors. And I was told to say we can also open them, but whatever. We can kick down doors. Because in an organization like the League, with our history, I think we really have that capability sometimes to be that bridge, and to, again, let other people say, hey, I really need you to support me on this, even if it's not one of our core issues. And we do a lot of that. And to be there and to say, look, we're this, storied 102-year-old institution. Yeah, you know what? we're going to sit here and be like, hey, you know what? I just opened the door for you. Here you go. This is the message that you need to be hearing, representative, person in power, whatever it may be. But I would hope that we can be used in that way.
Well, thank you. Well, from the national voice at this forum itself, we, whoever has felt disadvantaged are welcome to use the League of Women Voters. And I do, and I try. That's why I'm a member, and that's why I'm doing this, because I think that this is part of that. I'm so proud, and so just really, this is a wonderful conversation, and I want to thank you all, the panelists and the attendees, for being here, and your comments and your questions and all the interactions you had with us. Like Tania was saying, like everybody was saying, this is work, and I appreciate you being here for the work. And with that, I will pass it back to our lovely organizing committee and invite you to have a wonderful evening.
Before anyone leaves,
I too want to
Adele,
thank,
yes, thank you. Go ahead, Adele.
I too want to thank Saunatina and the panelists again, and everyone else who's been involved in planning this. Lauren, Kathy, Barb, Lev. Before I tell you about our April forum, click next slide. Next slide, there we go. Don't forget, next. There we go. Don't forget that you too, if you're not a member already, are welcome to join us or make a contribution by visiting our website at www.lwvskc.org. Click. To give a preview of our April 7th forum next month, Claiming the Power of the Classroom. Yes, it's about schools. At this time, many families and students are hurting from a loss of social contacts and classroom time. Their teachers are the foundation of their connections to school and to trusting relationships that can smooth the path to healing this hurt that is in our schools. Join us and some guests next month for a discussion on helping the community come back stronger. Where are the teachers? Why do so many contemplate quitting? What do we need to understand? Who's doing the work? Now we owe our thanks, or then we will owe our thanks to our education committee under the leadership of Joanna Cullen. They're working hard putting this together. I look forward to our gathering again next month on April 7th. And now I want to thank each of you for coming tonight, for having your go at this DEI. Have a good rest this evening. And if any of you are still here, oh, excuse me, you're supposed to go to the next slide. And now I thank each of you for coming tonight, sure. And I do hope you appreciate that tonight your leaders have shared their vulnerabilities, pure and unscripted, with courage. Not all conversations will be comfortable, but with courage, what we must do is just this, if we're going to live into our diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thanks.